Thanks for to the organisers of so much work, especially Sarah. Brilliant work. I look around this room. I know so many people here. So many people have inspired me are in this room. So really good to see you here. I'm going to talk about something a bit different. I mean, as a scientist, I am always thinking about the science and trying to understand it. But more and more, I'm trying to understand human psychology, and I'm talking about self-delusion, and I'm becoming so aware of how much we are deluded and we delude ourselves. So I'm just going to give some examples on what we're not doing in New Zealand, but deluding ourselves that we are doing things, and it's really quite bizarre to be. I mean, we'll all do this, I guess. We'll be here and we'll be talking this stuff and we'll be fired out, and then we'll go out on the street and the whole world's going on as if nothing's changed. And probably I'll go back to normal life, but trying to understand it. So I'll talk about the net zero delusion as the big delusion that really fires me up, and I'll talk about and Marta's already touched on it, this decarbonising energy delusion that we've got ourselves into. So what got to me, and this is going back a few years, and I'm going to sort of try reading this because it's something I've written, but I'll probably go off script, but when I looked at business and government responses to our overshoot disaster, and the overshoot disaster that we talk about the most, which was climate change, I saw this thing that came out, this idea of offsetting by planting trees, or offsetting carbon, and it was really poignant for me because I've been tied up in fresh water for so long, and I've seen this bizarre and dangerous concept of offsetting harm, and it's out there in ecology. I'd seen it. The idea is that you can harm over here, and as long as you make up for it over here, it's all right. It's like, chop my leg off, that's all right, because you'll give me a facelift later. It's bizarre, and yet we take it seriously. The idea that we could offset carbon that was stored in ancient times in today's carbon cycle, it made no sense to me as a scientist. I couldn't fathom out how you could genuinely think that would really work. But yet I see all these grown-up people wearing suits, this town's full of them, who talk about it and as if it's real every day. Our whole government policy, our response, what we've signed up to with Kyoto and Paris and the IPCC. I thought I must have got it wrong, and so I dug deeper. And I stuck with that gut instinct, and I realised, I did the sums, and it is a delusion, and at best it's a delaying tactic, but at worst, and this is what we're seeing, it just allows more carbon to be burnt and unabated, and it underpins our policies. So the reality that any land system, trees or soil, can only mitigate carbon in the current cycle. Only the carbon that has been lost from trees or soils can be replaced. The carbon atom in the trees or the soils is the same as the carbon atom from fossil fuels, but that's the only similarity because they come from different time periods. So what comes from from fossil fuels is additional carbon. So you can imagine that this carbon cycle, before we started burning fossil fuels, was in some kind of dynamic equilibrium. You're going from oceans to trees to carbohydrates to long-chain carbons and cycling through the system. And then we start introducing this stuff from at least 65 million years ago and going back a lot longer than that. I mean, we're doing it at 20 million times the rate that it was sequestered at. So when we plant a tree, we're not offsetting carbon. All we're doing is putting back the carbon that we lost when we chopped the tree down. It's as simple as that. It's not magic. You can't magically take that carbon up when it was released at a time. So you're not offsetting a single gram of fossil carbon when we do that. And of course we make these declare that we're going to do these things, and then what we do is we end up locking up land and forests that we then put on future generations to have to maintain these forests, and the commitment comes with the risk of wildfires. I mean, we're just seeing that happening all around the world at the moment. And we're seeing the storm damage. Look at Tairāwhiti. This is what happens when you plant forests. You've created a problem for the future as well. And that land then can't be used to grow food. So in so many ways, it's cutting off future options as well. So we have to expose this bullshit that we are caught up in, that we have to, it's just a can-kicking delusion, you know? Even if we planted every single tree and put all the carbon back into the soil on the whole planet, you know, forgetting that we live in all these places now, we would still only buy ourselves, at best, 10 years, and then we're still stuck. And if that wasn't sort of bad enough to make a total mockery of it, is that we are chopping down trees at the rate twice that we are planting them. So for every tree we plant, we chop down 2 trees. So that is like, how delusional would you have to be to believe that you can mitigate fossil carbon with trees, with soil, and then to be doing it at the same time as chopping it down at twice that speed? So we have to plant trees and we have to put carbon back in soil, yes, that's what we have to do. But it's not instead of burning fossil fuels, it's as well as stopping burning fossil fuels. We have to do both of those things, not one so we can get away with the other. To me, it's the modern day version of the Emperor's New Clothes, or, you know, it's the same thing as the Catholic Church's Middle Ages selling of indulgences, you know, where it's just, we might laugh at what the Catholic Church did, but we are doing that right now, and people are taking it seriously, and it means we don't get anywhere. But we'll play the tree game. I want to play the planting tree game to give you an idea of just how much land area, converting our fossil emissions into tree planting to understand the level of our... So in 2021, we emitted 76 million tonnes of carbon. And then we say, oh, but that's gross carbon. Net carbon is 27 million tonnes of it is locked up in forests. But New Zealand was all forests. You can't go plant some trees that were trees already and then say that's mitigated some of that. What bullshit is that? So if you convert that, you'd need to plant, going to pines and going on the figures, 2.3 million hectares a year to match out, if you want to play that game of net emissions. Well, it turns out that the work that's been done on the land area of New Zealand that could be planted that isn't arable already is an estimate of between 1 and 3 million hectares. So 1 year's worth of emissions is going to wipe out all of the land area that we could plant anyway. And then if we went to natives, then it's 8 million hectares. And so it's just impossible to do it. So I want to just touch on decarbonising energy delusion as the other delusion, and Marta's already kind of put some into that. But I started looking at some of the numbers for New Zealand, and I hope people realise this, because I keep hearing all these figures about we're 80-something%, you know, renewable. I want to make sure that you understand that we are 28% renewable energy in this country is how much of our energy consumption, and that has not changed since 1990. So despite building all of these wind farms and all of the solar panels that you see everywhere, we have not proportionally changed how much renewable. So that's another one of the delusions that we play in here. I want to talk about this, just to kind of talk on this proposal that I've seen for offshore. Have you seen it? Offshore wind turbines off Taranaki is their latest plan. I think they're going to link it through to making hydrogen. I looked at the materials required because I'd seen some stuff about offshore wind turbines, so I went to the IEA and looked at the figures. It turns out for offshore wind, and I'm just going to pick on copper for a start, 8 tonnes per megawatt So 8 tonnes of copper for a megawatt of wind turbine. The average offshore wind turbine now is 7.4 megawatts, so that's 60 tonnes of copper in every single one of those turbines that they're planning to put out there. The rock to metal ratio for copper at the moment, and most of it's coming from Chile, and is 513. So for every tonne of copper, there's 513 tonnes of material got dug up and chopped. I don't know, we should do that when we pick up our cell phone or something, multiply it by 513. Actually, copper's one of the best. You know, that 513 cell phones worth of material went into that, and it would be a lot worse than that. But so if you multiply that out for that whole project, then that's 30,000 tonnes of material dug up for one turbine, and for that project they're planning there is 1.6 million tonnes of material would have to be dug up just for the copper part of it. And that would be in Chile, and there's huge water availability issues around that as well. And so then if you look at the other, so you look at you look at all of the materials that go into it, and just look at the amount of materials per megawatt of energy produced for wind and solar and, offshore, onshore and solar. It's 10 times more material for wind offshore than for nuclear or any of the things that we have at the moment. And it's about 6 times for solar panel. So you think about if you're going to have the same amount of energy in the future that you have now, it's between 6 and 10 times more material needed for every unit of energy. If you try to scale that up, it's destroyed the planet. If we even try, this is the biggest fear for me that we will try. I know we're not going to do it, but it's the trying that would do so much harm. And there's another studies that have shown that of our budget of carbon that we have left to stay under some of these, either the 1.5 or 2, then just starting this transition to renewable energy, if we were to replace what we have, would use up all of that carbon budget. And plus another 10 to 34% reduction in net energy because of all the energy that would be used to make the energy. I kind of also want to just talk about some stuff that I've been working on just to finish up about that. For a lot of people, this idea of how much we have to reduce our consumption is scary. But I've pulled out some figures for, I'm an old guy, but in my lifetime, we've almost trebled, I've almost trebled, or people my age have trebled our energy consumption. Per capita energy consumption in New Zealand has almost trebled since the 1960s. The number of vehicles per capita in New Zealand has gone up 300% in that time. The size of the houses has more than doubled in that time. So I just want to kind of, I guess, try to put a positive spin on it, in that I was alive in that time with a third of the energy consumed now, and it wasn't horrible life, we just stuck it. So anyway, I just think we have to, part of this getting it across or getting the change, we have to end this delusion. As long as the delusion exists, then nothing will change. And as long as headlines keep coming out about wind turbines and magic energy, everyone's just going to go, I don't have to change because all this magic's coming. So we have to laugh at the emperor and say we can see that you're naked. Laugh at people when they talk about offsetting emissions, when Air New Zealand talk about planting trees and, get round to some of that reality around that. So, thanks very much for listening to my rant, George.